Thank you everyone for coming. So the last session for today is about chatbots, and I'm going to talk about the past, the present, and the future of chatbots. A little bit about me. I am the founder and CEO of a small startup in Seattle called Takeri Solutions, and I'm also a faculty member at Northeastern University in Seattle teaching AI and natural language processing related courses. My company is focused on developing solutions for helping computers to understand human language. More recently, we're focused on developing custom chatbots. A little bit of an overview about my talk. I'm going to start with a brief discussion of what are chatbots, how did chatbots evolve, why should we be excited about chatbots now, and some use cases of chatbots in real life, the internals of a chatbot. The most interesting piece is how do you build your own chatbot? And finally, where are we going from here? The first question, what is a chatbot? It's basically a computer program that's designed to simulate conversations with human users. So here's an example where somebody types in reorder, and the chatbot knows the context of what you're talking about. They said, well, it looks like your last order was this one, cappuccino, extra hot, extra large size, and the quantity was 1. And you have two options. You say, no, cancel or reorder that. This is a very simple chatbot, but it's still very complex in the back end because it understands context of what you're talking about. It knows about time. It's not presenting an order that you ordered maybe a year ago. This is something that you did maybe 5 minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, or 20 minutes ago. So how did these chatbots evolve? The evolution is very interesting because it started with the Turing test. The Turing test was developed in the 1950s by a person called Alan Turing. And the idea was that this is a test which would evaluate whether a computer can be indistinguishable from a human being. It's something like this. If there's this person who sends 2 packets to 2 different people or machines behind 2 doors, this person should be able to, or should not be able to distinguish between which reply came from a user or a human being versus which reply came from a computer. And today, we're at that stage where we can simulate computers to act more and more like humans by training them on all of these conversations, millions and millions of data sets which are actually human behavior. So now we're getting the question of, for how long can we pass the Turing test as opposed to can we even really pass the Turing test? The other piece about how chatbots came about is through question answering. There are these easier type of questions like factoid questions, which are based on facts, which means questions like what, when, where, if, where the answers are objective. And these answers can be retrieved or extracted from things like Wikipedia pages, where if you ask a question, well, where was Barack Obama born? You have this answer nicely placed in a table on the web page, on the Wikipedia page of Barack Obama. Then there are more hard questions, which we are still struggling with, and these are basically the questions that break the Turing test. Things like how to cook lasagna. Well, this is a procedural, step-by-step kind of an answer. You cannot just give it something like boil your pasta and you're done. You need the entire list from start to finish, and you need maybe pictures. The second type of question, which is more interesting, is how could you do that to me? Which, as a human being, we know the answer is I'm sorry, or something of that sort. But a computer could say, well, I took the knife and I stuck it in your back, and then something else happened, which is a much more objective kind of a step-by-step thing, which we don't want. But it's very hard to distinguish between these 2 different types of questions. The third piece of how chatbots evolved is when it came into mainstream communication and mainstream devices. In 2011, Siri became a part of iOS and iPhones, and it was a big deal to have a person-like thing to communicate with and ask questions right there on your cell phone. You could look at weather and locations and set up reminders and call people, and that was a very big deal back in 2011. Another thing that happened in 2011 was Watson by IBM competed in Jeopardy, and it actually beat 2 human people who were experts in their fields and experts in Jeopardy with a prize of $1 million. And that was a very big deal because now we were at that stage, and it's a big deal for science, that we can actually compete, we can actually make computers compete with human beings for answering questions. Today, we are taking that and helping businesses, helping lots of different industries to simulate these conversations and have human beings do much more interesting tasks. Now, here's a quick demo of a Best Buy app where they have a digital assistant, and we wanted to ask them a question about, do you do price match? Well, there was nobody available to chat right away online, so we tried the digital assistant, and it gave us an answer from the FAQs. And if you look at the Best Buy FAQs on the website, there are thousands of them. It's really hard to maneuver your way through all of that. But getting this while you're talking to somebody and them asking you at the end of it, does this really help with your question, really helps streamline the entire process of searching the web for your answer, or being on hold with a person and trying to get your answer, or just screaming at your phone saying, representative, representative. So that brings me to the next topic of why we should be excited about chatbots. One of the most important things is we can outsource mundane and repetitive jobs to computers. Customer service is handling a lot of questions. I mean, if you're like me, you probably have called your bank a couple times to figure out where can you find the account number or the routing number on your account, because it's hidden in a way that it's hard to discover. But that could be easily automated by a chatbot, and a chatbot can tell you exactly how to find it with screenshots and a bunch of other things. So it's a repetitive question that might be occurring 70% of the time in the financial industry. Figuring out which customers are disgruntled and replying to them, you can tell the tone of a customer, you can figure out the urgency of a customer based on how they write something, how many capitals they're using, and several other things to figure out who has a higher priority and who does not. The upside of this is that humans can focus on more interesting issues. We do not want to replace people, because people interaction is definitely not replaceable. But they can focus on something where a much more higher level of emotional and regular intelligence is required. Digital assistants are available instantaneously. You don't have to, there's no downtime except when your server crashes, but even then there are concurrencies in place. And they perform specific tasks. So if you have a digital assistant for FAQs with the example that I showed you, that's what it does. It helps you with FAQs and nothing else. If you ask that assistant about how do I save my marriage, or what's the meaning of life, it won't do a good job at that, and we shouldn't expect it to do a good job at that. Another reason why chatbots are a huge opportunity is that one of the recent studies, credit to Business Insider, is that people like communicating with other people as opposed to communicating to everybody. So if you see the yellow line, it is social networking apps, and the red line is messaging apps. And people like messaging one-on-one significantly more than as compared to networking or sharing with a lot of other people. So here, that brings me to an example of real-life use cases. So there's somebody who goes to a website for a real estate chatbot, and the system says, well, how can I help you? And this person says, I need to put in a service request to have a leak in the kitchen faucet fixed. the system says, I can set that up for you. How long has the leak been going on? This is interesting because the system looks at the duration. When there's a leak, you want to know how long something's been going on to determine the urgency of that leak. It started last night. Well, the system deemed it to be very urgent, and it said, well, I can have a technician take a look at it within the hour, because if it's been happening overnight, it's probably a big deal. Do we have your permission to enter the house when no one is around? Yes, and the system scheduled this visit around this leak problem. And there are several things going on in the back end. The system understands real estate concepts. It understands the concept of leaking, which is a big deal. It understands the concepts of urgencies about what to do, how early to schedule, how late to schedule. It has connections with individual people and their schedules. And it also performed a scheduling concept. Another example is for sensor data. Why is room 221 so cold? Looks like the temperature sensor is not functioning. Abnormal temperatures recorded for the past 3 hours. Abnormal temperatures, which means that temperatures should usually be within a certain range for human beings. And if it's not in that certain range, there's something wrong. And it's probably the sensor as opposed to the actual room being very cold or very hot. Can you put in a service ticket for it? Done. This request is in schedule and will be performed at 4:45 p.m. on this specific day with this specific person. So the system is doing all of this repetitive and manual work for us, and we don't need to worry about doing that as human beings. So now we come to the more interesting parts of what are the internals of a chatbot. When you're designing your own chatbot, there are some basic considerations that you need to focus on. One is, what is the core task? Why do you think this task is important, and do you have data to support it? So for instance, if 70% of your web traffic asks these FAQ questions, number 100 to 150, we want a chatbot to do really, really well on those questions and not bother about all the other things in the world. What is the input data? So the previous example that I gave was it needed to be connected to sensor data. It needed to be connected to scheduling of all the customer service representatives and a bunch of other things. So what is all of that? What are all of those inputs that your chatbot needs to be connected to? What is the output? Do you want to change a number on a spreadsheet? Do you want to change a sensor? Do you want to have sales projections? Will you be working with sensitive data? Because if that's true, then you'll have to have more barriers. You'll have to create your own server with extra protection, HIPAA compliance for medical data and others for financial data. And what kind of natural language understanding do you need? Do you need deep understanding? Do you need some kind of shallow understanding with just simple regular expression matching? And finally, the interesting question is, do you want your chatbot to appear human? If it does not appear human, people don't want to interact with it. But if it appears too human, it just seems like, oh, this chatbot's acting way too smart. I don't like it. Nobody knows the meaning of life. Why are you even trying to attempt it? Here's roughly how a chatbot architecture should be. We have input text, core NLU engine, some tasks that we want to perform, and then goes computing a solution and coming back to a final response. Some things that we need to consider: how much context should a chatbot remember from the past? The leaky faucet example that I gave. If you have that same leaky faucet thing for the past year, that this happened in the last year, it implies something else. It means that there might be plumbing issues in the house. If this leaky faucet request was sent in the last 5 minutes, you think, well, it's a duplicate request. Let me flag it as duplicate because this is already handled. So understanding that context is pretty significant. This is an example of a time-based context, but there are several others that we can think about. What type of context should we remember? So time is one. Jokes and sense of humor, probably not. review about given products. Maybe that's interesting. What's the purpose of the chatbot? I already talked about the Turing test, but there are several others like generic bots. There's so many out there that tell you the weather, that tell you the time, or that can navigate from location A to location B. And then there are specialized bots that are few and far in between, like a retail bot for placing new orders, or a healthcare bot that can help you talk to somebody when you really need to talk to somebody. Customer service bots, which are coming up significantly in a lot of different areas. UX design. So here's an example of subtle confirmation. If somebody asks, what's the weather in Toronto? The temperature in Toronto, Canada is minus 3 degrees Celsius. The interesting thing is it did not look at Toronto, Ohio. It looked at Toronto, Canada. It changed the temperature from degrees Fahrenheit to degrees centigrade. And it confirmed that I'm telling you the temperature for Toronto, Canada. Now the user can come back and say, oh, that's not the Toronto that I was looking for, in which case your chatbot can switch it up again and tell you the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit for that specific location. And this is a simple example, but it shows how a chatbot can be customized so much to not only appear human, but not keep asking questions, but just present information and leave it up to the user to interpret what they want to. Personality. Do you want your chatbot to be funny and happy, or do you want them to have a much more serious personality? That has to be defined early on, because the language that you would use would depend on what the personality of the chatbot is. So the most important and the fun part of the talk is, how do I build my own chatbot? Few things to consider. Where do you want to host it? What kind of infrastructure do you want? Do you want your chatbot to live on Slack only? Do you want people in your company to use it? Do you want the world to use it? What kind of NLP do you want? It's hard to get away from chatbots without natural language processing and artificial intelligence. And you can do something very shallow, like if you see the word leak in any text, flag it as A and or give a specific reply. But then, the word leak can be leaky cauldron from one of the Harry Potter books, which doesn't represent a leak in your house. So there are lots of things to think about between the shallow and the deep NLP. Deep is definitely something that's required for more complex tasks. Can some NLP be outsourced to an external API? There are a lot of APIs out there, which I'll get into in a second, which can handle a lot of these tasks, these more complex tasks. Quick platforms that we have: Facebook Messenger, Slack, the top few ones. Where can we host them? Well, if you're building your own chatbot, AWS, Google Cloud are one of the most popular ones. Pivotal and several others are available as well. Some advantages of using a pre-existing chat platform. There's already an existing user base. You can separate logic from the infrastructure. You can handle sessions much better. There's downtime management and faster user acquisition. Here are some chatbot services that are available with Python SDKs for us to use and to build. Now, these are just a small snippet of it, and with a few cases that I've looked at. There's several more cases and a much more larger spreadsheet for this specific thing, and if you're interested, please feel free to email me and I can send that to you. I'll talk about a couple of them, and so that you have a flavor of what each of them offers. Chatterbot is a free-to-use API on GitHub, and it is trained on lots of different conversations. If person A says something, person B says something else. So if he says hi, it replies with hello. If you say howdy, it replies with maybe howdy or something else that's more appropriate to howdy. The conversational services for Chatterbot is to appear human, as opposed to do any task. So if you go back to my architecture that I presented, it only focuses on the first part. There's input text, and then there's output. It doesn't actually do NLU or any understanding or performing any task. One of the most popular ones is API.ai, which is acquired by Google. It has some natural language understanding for selected verticals, which means that it works with a limited set of domains. So things like booking, calculators, contacts, it has enough data that it has trained on it that it can understand things that are referring to shopping and things that are referring to news and things that are referring to booking. So if you are building something which requires any one of these, there's no need for you to build from scratch. You can always use this API to handle the contacts part of your chatbot or your calculator part of your chatbot or several other things. It supports a large number of languages, which is also very interesting and very, very rare. It was acquired by Google in 2016. And it also has the ability to train new classifiers. If you have your own data, if you want to train on something more proprietary, you could do that. And that data would, as long as it's not sensitive, you can actually share that data and train your own models. There's one drawback of using API.ai, and that is it runs on a query-based thing. A user has to initiate a chat as opposed to a chatbot initiating a chat. Now, the interesting thing in that is it's similar to querying a search engine. I ask a question, the chatbot gives me a response. Well, sometimes responses are much more complex, and chatbots need to ask follow-up questions, like the leak example. When did it happen? Where is the location? Is there a puddle around it? And a bunch of other things, which API.ai cannot do by itself, and we need to add more components for it to do that. It also doesn't understand context or doesn't have that functionality of context. The next thing, Motion.ai, it's a flowchart-based system where you can build a flowchart of conversations. And it converses based on how you have designed your flowchart to be. They are focused on visually building, training, and deploying chatbots. They view chat interfaces as flowcharts. They have some bot templates like the previous one, like the restaurant bot, survey bot, pet adoption bot, and so on. So it's a little more complicated than the previous one. But they're focused significantly on infrastructure. Not a lot of NLP, not a lot of machine learning. There is some. So you might have to take the core science piece of it outside and use it for infrastructure to create beautiful bots. The third thing, which is probably the last one that I'm going to talk about, is Wit.ai. They market themselves as natural language for developers, which means that if you're a developer and if you want to use any kind of NLP, you can use this to build your chatbot. The good thing is there's lots of NLP support for developers. It's multilingual. The core functionality is limited, and that's an obvious thing. And only the data that's freely available in the world can be used to train any kind of model. So if you're looking to build a best bot that's proprietary to your company, you would have to provide that proprietary data. Flowchart-based conversation management, and it's owned by Facebook. One of the things I wanted to say is flowchart-based conversations are great if the user follows through and answers exactly what the bot is talking about. But we don't think that way. You know, I was working with a bot recently, and they asked me for my email address, and I said, I don't want to share it right now. And it replied saying, that doesn't sound like an email address. Can you give me your email address? And that happened 5 times. I said, this is not working. And I said, no, thank you. I was polite. I said several things. I also tried their spam detection system, and I said a not so polite word, and they still did not detect that this might be a spammy user. So there are several things that we need to consider when we are working with a flowchart-based system, because we are not wired that way, and we need our bots to accommodate that and make sure that they switch around in different pieces of the flowchart based on what the human being is talking about. So what is missing? Chatbots need to be experts in their fields. They don't need to know trivia about the world. Unfortunately, most chatbots that are being used out there know only trivia about the world, and they are not experts in their field. A lot of people are working on that, like real estate bots or cosmetic surgery bots, finance bots. A lot of companies are coming up, banks are coming up with their own financial bots to make transactions and several other things. A lot of services try to build a one-fits-all solution, but examples like API.ai or Motion.ai cannot accommodate for all different types of solutions. You need very focused solutions to solve your specific problem. So the solution is to build your own bot, build a custom chatbot. Not use freely available chatbots for everything, but use it for specific things like scheduling or calendar or calculator. For instance, if Bank of America needs a chatbot, that bot needs to understand things like checking account and money market account. But if Home Depot wants to build a chatbot, the bot needs to understand things like backsplash workshop and half-inch drywall screws. Completely different vocabulary, completely different semantics. So if you want to build a chatbot, here are some skills that you need to know. You need to have some idea about what architectures are present, some NLP expertise, syntax and semantics, keyword extraction, topic modeling, question answering, a few of them which would help you understand the next steps of what to do. Machine learning, classification and clustering at a very minimum. And finally, coming back to the architecture of the chatbot, we talked about all of these, and the last one. Once you know what needs to be done, how do you present a response back to the user? That's an important question. The ideal approach is, well, you generate this beautiful text that the chatbot automatically creates, and you present it to the user. And so you break down the sentence into individual components, form a new sentence that's syntactically correct. But state of art isn't there yet. And you can see that if you look at Google Translate. Often when you translate from language 1 to language 2 feels like it was generated automatically, and it doesn't quite convey what a human would say. So it's a choice that you need to make. That would you be comfortable with simple grammatical errors where the sentence is created by a bot? Or you can use a template-based system, which is what Siri and Alexa and all of these other systems are using right now, where you have this template and several versions of this template, which says things like your order number blank was delivered to blank at blank time. Thank you for shopping with us. And this same template is used for anybody who's asking about a specific order, and they just replace these blanks with the actual information. What Siri does is it has a large variety of ways in which it conveys this information. So when you ask the same question repeatedly again and again, you do not get bored because you get a large variety of answers. So that brings me to the end of the talk. Where are chatbots going from here? All leading verticals have begun to use chatbots. Several different financial institutions have released new chatbots. Macy's has one that they've worked with IBM Watson. We are able to outsource a lot of mundane and repetitive tasks, and I think that's a huge advantage to do. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think you could do with chatbots. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Again, if you want to reach us on Twitter, it is @PyDayToSeattle, and I can take questions on Twitter or from the audience. So you comment that all the major verticals have chatbots right now. Do you see any special purpose chatbots or any really chatbots making a leap beyond what they currently do with simple answers?
I think there's a huge potential for chatbots. They will be making a leap maybe sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. We are definitely not there yet. Due to several considerations. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is things like healthcare or suicide lines, where people are not available at different times of the night to help other people to talk through their problems. Or there are people who are waiting in line to talk to specialists. And if we have these bots that can ask questions, or if we have these bots that can recommend resources, it would help significantly to in the healthcare department. And that's just one. I mean, there's so many like finance, which bots would be beneficial.
Yes.
Question. So, what are the common metrics you use to evaluate chatbots?
That's a very good question.
So what are the common metrics to evaluate chatbots? Do you mean successfulness of chatbots, or?
In phase two, like, I mean, I'm a chatbot, I'm spitting out responses, so you need to automate this process, you need to optimize your lot more.
So how do we measure success of building the chatbot itself? How successful is the chatbot in its conversations?
Yeah.
So how do you evaluate chatbots? I've gotten this question a lot, and there's no one answer for it. If you do search-based, if your chatbot is doing search-based things like FAQs, you know how search is evaluated. You know you need precision, and you need recall, and you need F-score, and you're done. But with chatbots, it's much more complicated because you want to know how the human is receiving something, receiving a response. You want to know whether they came back to use the chatbot, or the next time around they wanted to use some other interface. And this is just the human interface aspect. In the training aspect, based on your training data, if you have some kind of a classification approach where given statement A, you're classifying it into a calendar operation versus a scheduling operation, you can use the same metrics that you use for any classification machine learning task. And that should work. So at the end of it, you want to break down the complexity of your task into individual evaluation systems and test each individual system. And together, you're kind of simulating a human being. You know, it's hard to evaluate a human being. You can just evaluate different aspects of them. Like, this person is very smart, but this person doesn't know about leaking of faucets, but this person knows about something else. So it's you have to break it down to do the evaluation.
So Boris on the Twitter asks, how is the output logic for the Best Buy or real estate bot generated from the training data?
The Best Buy bot and the real estate bot are two separate bots. The Best Buy bot was trained on the FAQs, I believe, of Best Buy, and the real estate bot was for that real estate company and on their own data.
So it sounds to me like most of these bots are fairly special purpose, and you're going to be training mostly on your own unique data sets.
Yes, there are a large number of generic bots, but if I ask you today which bots are your favorite bots, you'd be like, oh, I don't think anybody has a favorite bot because most of them are very generic. It's only the specialized bots which help you with your day-to-day that you remember and that you want to use again and again.
Sir?
Yeah, so someone, let's say, want to build, spend 2 years, like a couple of guys want to spend 2 years, build as much as possible bot. And they have to decide a choice between, adopting one of the SDK, let's say from Facebook or Slack, or they invest into, low-level AI, like semantic network and things like that, built from scratch. So, do you think a, ready-to-use SDK can build a smart bot like, IBM built for winning the parody? Is it possible to build with the SDK available right now?
So the SDKs that are available right now are trained on data that's freely available right now. So Google News, for instance, is one where that news is available, that text is available, classifications are available. So you can scrape that news for maybe a year and train your model, or Wikipedia, or several other corpora. Now, if you're building your bot for something much more specialized, like maybe something internal to Microsoft, because we are in Microsoft, maybe it's something about how the buildings are structured, or what are the plans for the future and things like that. You want to have your bot trained on that proprietary data. And when you get into that level of customization, off-the-shelf APIs don't seem to work. They would work on very generic cases only. So in that case, you want to build your own semantic network, your own training, your own modules, and build out a bot.
We have another good question from Jang on Twitter. Are there any bots or SDKs, et cetera, that you have recently read that have the capacity for the bot to actually learn a new procedure or a new method?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, there's a lot of research in that area for computers to learn, or systems to learn new tasks and new functionality. I don't think it has come into the bot space yet, but it has come into teaching robots to trust human beings and a bunch of other things. But it's in a very research intensive phase right now.
Thank you very much. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're wrapping up a little early because we do have to clear this room and get it turned over so that we can have entertainment and food in here shortly. I remind you that coming up soon is the Pi Data, the pub trivia contest over in Kodiak. And we'll be back here again after 6:20. Thank you very much.